The 140i is back, and this time it's stage 3 time. It's hybrid turbo time. Come on.
Big dog status, I'm a big dog vet. I pull up on the block in a big car.
Ignoring all of the cosmetic mods that we've done to the 140i, we've done a fair few performance modifications. It's running stage 2 now at around 430 bhp. Of course, I don't need to remind you guys that this was a stolen, recovered 140i that instead of putting a 140i front end on, we put an M2 front end on and an M2 style rear bumper. I think it looks sick. It's one of a kind. But hopefully by the end of this video, the 140i should be over 550 bhp. This is the ultimate Asbo hatchback. It's so noisy, it is so quick, and there's so many modifications that you can do to it. We've already done the diff, which made a massive, absolute transformation of it. I think we've got a pipe across air filter on there, a downpipe, and pretty much a straight through exhaust. Now, not only am I going to install the hybrid turbo, we also still need to address the little accident that we had in the unit with the heater where we melted the front grille and also this lower grille as well. But I'm excited and nervous to get this turbo on, so let's get to the unit. Sometimes I think the exhaust bangs on the 140i are a little bit too much, but then I remember how much of a smile it brings to my face. We can blame Philip Mallory Performance for that. Now the 140i engine, or otherwise known as the B58 engine, is brilliant. It's a 3-litre 6-cylinder turboed engine, and it's capable, without doing any internal work, of over 550 horsepower. Well, at least I hope it is. Now before we make any progress today, we need to be taking off the stock turbo, which is connected to the exhaust manifold, and also the high pressure fuel pump needs to come off as well, because we're going to be upgrading that. So, well, let's crack on with it. Now, as most of you may know, I'm not a mechanic. I just learn as I go along. But as I took the engine cover of this looked like it was going to be a fairly easy job. But I soon learned I was wrong. The turbo and the exhaust manifold were pretty easy to get to. It's just on the side of the engine. And as you can see, there were 7 10mm bolts which held the top of the manifold to the engine, which again were really accessible. There's a few electrical connectors to disconnect, and I was going to try and get away with just disconnecting the downpipe and not actually removing it. Up the car goes in the air, and the under trays have got to come off because there's a bracket which holds the turbo underneath. And I soon learned I wasn't going to get to that bolt without taking the downpipe off, which came off with the rest of the exhaust. It was just easier. Then I could access that bolt to loosen, then the turbo and the manifold was free to come out. And with a bit of wiggling and manoeuvring, the turbo and the manifold was out, and there is a turboless 140i engine. And finally, the old turbo is off. It took a little longer than I expected, but do you know what? I don't know what I expected. It's a turbo. So here is the stock turbo on the 140i. Doesn't look like anything too special. And here is the hybrid turbo. Now, I know what you're thinking.
They look exactly the same.
The meanings have changed of hybrid turbo over the years. Nowadays, it means sort of like an electric assisted turbo, I think. But in petrol head terms, a hybrid turbo essentially means we use the same casing, the stock casing. So from outside, it looks completely stock. But on the inside, that's where the magic happens. As you can see, the turbo fins in there. There is a lot more than there is on the standard turbo. This means more boost, which also means more power. Come on. So essentially, it's the same thing on the outside, but what's underneath is what counts, and that is what makes it extra special, which reminds me. Here's me. You could say nothing unfamiliar. It's the same thing on the outside, but it's what's underneath these which is making me extra special. And that's all thanks to the Manscaped's Performance Package 4.0. It includes the Lawnmower 4.0 to keep your downstairs garden looking fresh. It has an LED light, skin-safe technology, and it's completely waterproof. Next up is the Weed Whacker, the same skin-safe technology, but this time to use on your ears and nose. It gets rid of all those pesky hairs to leave you feeling trim and fresh. And it doesn't just stop there. To finish it off, you've got ball toner and ball deodorant. So you could say I'm a hybrid man. I'm the same on the outside, but I've just had a few upgrades underneath. So if you want to freshen yourself up in the new year, then you can do it with the Performance Package 4.0. All you got to do is click the link in the description box below, use code Armstrong20, and that's going to get you 20 20% off, plus free international shipping, and not only that, there's 2 free gifts. Isn't that right? The Shed travel bag and the Manscaped anti-chafing boxers. Once again, thanks Manscaped for sponsoring this video. Let's go install the hybrid. So installing the hybrid turbo is pretty much the same thing, but in reverse. As you can see, the manifold doesn't really have any holes which slots onto the studs. Instead, what I should have done is left this bracket bolted to the engine, because the bottom of the manifold sort of slots into that bracket and then you bolt on the top. But oh well, you live and you learn. Now the turbo has an oil feed and an oil return pipe. As well as that, it has a coolant feed and a coolant return pipe. So I had to make sure they were all bolted on and sealed. And for some reason on the new turbo, the coolant lines just wouldn't go into the turbo. I ended up having to replace the O-rings with a smaller one, which I later paid the price for. Something else which is pretty vital when connecting the manifold up as well is to make sure that the gasket sits in place and you tighten the manifold up in the correct order, which I'll show on screen now, to make sure the manifold sits flat against the engine. But once all the oil and coolant lines were connected, I can make sure the downpipe was connected up, and then I can finally put all the under trays back on. Wow, I do not care who you are. If you've ever fitted a turbo to a 140i, if you didn't swear at least 10 times, you're a different species or you're just straight lying. But good news, the hybrid turbo is on and everything is all connected up just about. We've got a few more things that we need to connect up. And one of those things is the turbo elbow. So here is the stock turbo elbow. It's plastic. It's got like a little resonator in to sort of deaden the turbo noise. Whereas this one is smooth. It's from Osprey Performance as well. I'll put a link in the description. We're gonna get some nice turbo noises and a lot smoother airflow for the turbo. So the smoother the airflow and the quicker the air can move into the turbo, the more power we can get. And I'm hoping this turbo elbow will do exactly that. The elbow connects straight onto the cold side of the turbo, then the silicone hose connects to the elbow, and then the airbox will go onto the silicone hose. And we have to make sure this is all tight with no air leaks, because air leaks can cause power loss. And there we have it, new turbo is on. It looks exactly like what it did at the start of the video, but at least we all know that it's on. Next step is this little baby at the back here. This is the high pressure fuel pump. We've got an operated one. We want to be able to push more pressure, which equals more fuel, and now we're going to have more air, and more air pressure, which means more power, I think. Now after tackling something like the turbo, I thought the fuel pump would be a nice and easy job just to finish off. There's only 2 Torx bolts holding it to the actual engine, and then 2 fuel lines which go into it. And it came off pretty easy. Here's the old one, and here's the new one. Again, they don't look too different. But there's something on it which is different, which caused problems. When I connected the new one onto the car, I was quick to notice the sensor on it was facing the other way around, which made the electrical connector not reach to where it was meant to go. As you can see, this was the old one. So I had to cut the old wires and splice in some longer wires just so that connector could reach to the new high pressure fuel pump. And there we go, there's the finished product. A little bit ropey, but hey, it's gonna do the job, I hope. And with all that done, all we've got to do is top up the coolant with all the coolant that we lost from disconnecting the turbo. Okay, everything is on. Question is now, will it start? The way this job's going for me, I feel like it might not. But I don't want to jinx it. Touch wood, let's hopefully start this thing, and then we need to smoke test it and make sure there is no leaks, because then obviously it's going to be tuned and pushed harder with more boost, and well, if we've got any air leaks we're going to lose power obviously. So but let's start it first. It started. Okay, it started. I'm just going to check for leaks, and then we need to do the smoke test. Wait, hold it there. You hear that tapping noise? At the time, I thought this was normal, but that was actually the exhaust manifold blowing because it wasn't sitting flat against the engine. And that was because the exhaust gasket was on the wonk. It wasn't in the right position, which later meant I had to take the exhaust manifold off again, reposition the gasket, and then put it all back together. I feel like the car has got a little louder. It's definitely louder. Now with the car running, I wanted to check that there was no air leaks. So the next step will be to get it smoke tested. I still can't get over how noisy this thing is. So loud. I swear it's made it noisier. Out of one unit into another. Massive shout out to Malibu Performance for letting me borrow the smoke tester before it obviously gets tuned here. So if you're not sure what a smoke tester is, the smoke tester is going to go inside the intake. It's going to blow smoke, which will be pressurized as well, and then it's going to send it all through like the intake system or the boost system and everything like that. And if there's any leaks, then the smoke will appear from those leaks. And obviously if there is any leaks, that will cause a boost leak, which will cause less pressure in the system, which means less power, which is a no-go. We want more power. Let's get this smoke tester on. So to connect the smoke tester, pretty easy. We're just going to remove the air box, get the smoke tester. That goes into the silicone hose. You pump it up so it's airtight. We're going to connect the smoke tester to the positive part of the battery, the negative part, then connect the air line to the back of it. It will then begin to smoke. This smoke is going to be pushed into the induction system, and hopefully we won't see that smoke again until we disconnect. But sure enough, we did. It seemed just to be leaking out of this little breather pipe, which wasn't too much of an issue. A fairly easy fix. But then I found this. The coolant feeds going to the turbo were drastically leaking. Remember that O-ring I said I fitted earlier? Well, okay, so we're all good on smoke testing wise. But there's a coolant leak which is coming out the metal line which runs into the turbo. And I know why, because I couldn't get the line into the turbo. I thought the hole was a little bit smaller, so I changed the O-ring. Obviously the O-ring is now too small, and now there's coolant leaking out of it. Thank you very much. Let's get it back in my unit. Let's change that O-ring, and then we've got some more stuff to do before it needs to be tuned. We did it. No leaks, no coolant leaks, no air leaks. It is on. So whatever happens on the dyno now happens on the dyno. But we're not just done in here yet. We've still got a few more bits to do. And it has been doing my head in for at least a few weeks now. The grille on the front, which is melted. It ended up being about a £200 mistake, but hey, at least it didn't melt the bumper. So all I'm doing now is removing the bumper so I can get to both of the grills, which are just on clips. I could unclip the kidney grills from the back and then push it out. And here's the new kidney grill, which just pushes straight back in. To be honest, I probably could have done that on the car because I didn't mind breaking the clips on the old one. But what I couldn't do on the car is this lower grill. There's lots of clips on the bottom, and that comes out from the inside. But once that was off, the fresh one can go on, and we're back looking fresh as ever. All we're gonna do is refit the bumper, refit the wheels, and we're ready to go. Finally, the 140i is ready to be tuned. We've got the new front grille on, we've got the new lower grille on, and we've got no more tapping noises coming from the engine, which was actually the manifold blowing because the gasket just wasn't seated right. Straight to Malibu Performance. And we're ready for the tuning time at Malibu Performance, but not me. I haven't let you down. Phil has called in ill today, so this is Phil's fault. We're gonna have to wait for the next video. I'm sorry guys, but we're gonna have to wait until this 140i is tuned. Trust me, I want it tuned as much as you guys do. But if you enjoyed this video, hit that subscribe button, hit that thumbs up button, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace out. So if you want to freshen your and not only that, there's 2 free gifts. Isn't that right? Yeah.